Okay, so now we'll talk more about the communication part of clinical leading and working together with the crew in the ship. So first part, communication is really vital, I would say, to safety and for you guys to be able to communicate, and just as much for us to be able to communicate with you out in the village is really important, because things might develop or things might happen, things might change, and that we're able to communicate efficiently is very important for us to handle with that appropriately. So, first thing for you to remember in regards to communication is there needs to be any. So what you have to do as soon as you get in the village and you're sort of comfortable there with whatever communication you do with the local leaders and your team, is to set up the communication with the ship and check that it works. We'll go into more detail later, but if you have a handheld or if you set up the shore radio kit, first thing to do is to set that all up, power it up, and then give the ship a call and say, YMPNG, this is clinic, this is PHC Red, radio check, and then whoever is the boat master and the central point of communication will answer, PHC Red, this is YMPNG, read you loud and clear. Often we might say, this is PHC Red, and you're quite weak and broken, and then what you should do, you should just try to make some changes that we will talk more about later, and to be able to make sure that you can communicate properly with the ship. Cases, if there was something that were to change on our side of things, and we would need you to return or need you to do something drastic, it would be good that we can have communication right away to do that. And it's a big part of safety, and we don't want to get something challenging and then the communication hasn't been set up properly yet. You have to start doing that after whatever's happened has happened. So ideally you want to get this set up as soon as you can. So that's a bit of general. Just a couple of things when it comes to radios. It's expensive equipment, so we want to make sure that you guys that have a radio are responsible for it. That's why when you grab a radio from the wheelhouse in the morning, that you sign it out in the radio sign-out book, that's called. And it's a book, there's a binder just beside the radios. So you grab a radio and it will have a number on the front, and you go to that page in the book and you put your name and the time down. And when you return in the afternoon, you will return the radio, put it back on charge in there, and then sign it out. So you just put the time and you will sign it out. So that's quite important, so we take well care of these radios. Another classic just to be mentioned, it's always good to have the volume up, and it's a classic is that it's a lot of chattering on the radio, or a lot of it's just noise, and we turn on the radio, volume is the noise, and then you forget that you turn it down, and it's a classic I even do it at times. So just be very careful with turning down the radio. If you turn on the radio, it should be like, is this, I have to remember to turn this off again in a short while. And then working channel. So we use two types of radios as part of the ship's communication. All onboard ship communication happens on UHF radio. So that's ultra high frequency. It's a frequency that's very high, that it can easily penetrate to metal, so you can call from the engine room to the bridge without any issues. So all onboard communication is VHF. All off-ship to ship communication and between villages, it is VHF. So it's very high frequency. It's not as high as the ultra high frequency. What that does is that it reaches a lot further, but it doesn't penetrate as well as the ultra high frequency. That's why we use it that way. So for VHF, we use channel 73, and UHF we use channel 75. Mostly it's for scenic leaders to know the difference here, but main difference is, the main thing here is that these two are connected. So everything that happens on VHF, every talk that's been made on VHF, it gets transmitted on UHF to the ship by this machine. So if Ella is in her office with the UHF looking like this, and she can call PHC Red, it will go through a box that sort of picks up everything that happens on board on UHF, and it will transmit it on a big antenna up top on VHF that will go out to the village to you. So that's the main thing there. So 73 is the channel for these ones, and then 75 is the channel for these ones. main thing is for you guys that will be out in the villages to just remember it's 73, and that's where you need to be. Really. So just some general things about radio talking. We want to, because of communication and because it's radio and it's often not super clear, we just want to be, the sound that is, we want to be simple and short, and we want to have thought through what we're going to say before we start transmitting a message. So it's a good tip is just to think through what you want to say. How can I make this short and simple? And then you make the transmission to the ship. And then, yeah, so that's mainly it. Yeah, we can take all the technical stuff in one go. Yeah, and how the radio operation, I guess, normally works is that you have two stations that wants to get hold of each other. And how you do it, you grab a radio, this is a UHF, and there's a push to talk button on the side. It will say PTT on it normally, and just the biggest button on the sides. And you just press that, and then you call whoever you want to call. So if I want to call Ella, I would press this in and I would say, Ella, 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 this is Jan, and then let go. And then she has the time to hear her name, pick up the radio, it says Jan, this is Ella, and then I would say Ella, this is Jan, and then the message that I would have, short and simple, and then we will communicate like that till we're done. Some people say over when the conversation is over. If you like that, you can. Normally, people understand when the conversation is done. So that's how that is. Just so that's said, you just need to be like 15 centimeters from your mouth and just talk normally and clearly. That's all. Some people, have it very close, whatever. But it's just 10 centimeters from your mouth and then talk with a normal voice into the unit. So just some general terms for sort of radio language. If you say radio check, that means can you hear me? So you just check the clarity of the transmission, and that's the time where we'll say, oh, there's region broken or whatever, and we'll do some changes. You can do some changes on your radio. The next thing is go ahead. That means that you are ready to receive whatever the message is. Stand by. That if you're busy, if you're in the middle of something and someone calls you over and over again, you can just grab their radio and just say, Ella, this is Jan, stand by. And Ella would know that Jan is busy, and she will just stand by, and I will get to her as soon as I can. And then yes or no, just because of often radio signals can't be that, it's not always good. To say yes or no, you say affirmative or negative. It's just an easy way to because yes and no is short and can easily be confused. Affirmative or negative is a bit longer and sort of doesn't get confused that easily. So that's something you can use there. And then another one is say again. So it's very short and simple, all of these, because you want to be short and simple. And say again, that's you haven't been able to understand what was transmitted. If you say again, the other one would understand that, oh, they didn't get it, and it needs to be repeated. It sounds a bit like rude. Radio check, go ahead, say again. But it's just to make it short and simple and clear, and that's all that's necessary. And then you take up as little time for other people that needs to communicate as possible. And then lastly, it's just good to be mindful of how long you communicate on the radio, because there's often a lot of stuff going on, and the radio can be quite busy throughout the day. So if you're going to you need to have a long conversation. There's a lot of detail needs to be transmitted. I would recommend changing channel, and that I can show you later how to do, and to communicate that ahead that you will do change channel. Yeah. So that's that's it, I think. Is there any questions to any of this more general radio etiquette stuff? Alrighty, we'll go a quick break there then.